Greetings viewer. This week I'm driving the BMW X5 45e, the new plug-in hybrid version of the X5. There are two important changes that differentiate this 45e from the previous 40e. Firstly, the engine is no longer a 4-cylinder, it is now a 6-cylinder. It is a version of the B58 which produces 286 horsepower and 450 Newton meters of torque. It is aided by a 113 horsepower electric motor that also makes 265 Newton meters of torque. BMW says that combined they make 392 horsepower and 600 Newton meters of torque, which is enough to send this big SUV to 100 kilometers per hour from standstill in 5.6 seconds and onto a top speed of 235 kilometers an hour. The acceleration figure is impressive considering the fact that this plug-in hybrid version is around 300 kilos heavier than, say, a 40i X5. And speaking of the battery, that's the second change that this has over the 40e. The battery has grown considerably. It is now a 24 kilowatt hour pack, whose actual usable capacity is 21.5 kilowatt hours. This is a pretty big battery pack, even for a big plug-in hybrid SUV like this one. And BMW says that it should provide up to 87 kilometers of pure electric range. When I picked the car up from BMW, the battery was charged up to 98%, and I drove it for around 65-66 kilometers before the gasoline engine started. Although it has to be said that I did not drive it in the city. I didn't drive it on the highway either, but I drove it on quicker roads outside of town. So you could probably genuinely get closer to BMW's claim if you drive it in stop-start traffic, where an electric vehicle makes the most sense. Because as you know, unlike internal combustion engine vehicles, an EV is actually more efficient in town. And when you take it on faster roads, efficiency drops dramatically. You can't really drive it particularly quickly outside of town, because you will not be able to rely on its predicted range. But with around maybe 70 kilometers of real-world range, this X5 45e is genuinely useful, especially if you have the option to charge it at home or to keep the battery topped up. This is super important for a plug-in hybrid. If you're not going to bother charging it, don't get a plug-in hybrid, because you will just be lugging around extra weight. Just get the 40i, you get the same B58 engine in the 40i, and it's in a higher state of tune, and it's quicker. For most of my journey, which was around 400 kilometers for the round trip, I actually just relied on the gas engine. And the combined fuel efficiency rating that I got was around 12.2 liters per 100 kilometers. Not terrible, not great. So even though BMW could have fitted this car with a 2-liter engine, which would probably have been a bit more efficient, although not considerably so, I'm happy that they put the 6-cylinder in, because it's such a peach to drive. It's an amazing engine. It's super smooth. It's very enjoyable to rev out. It revs out to nearly 7,000 RPM. It sounds really good, and it sounds really good from the outside too. The exhaust noise is really intoxicating. I like it. I floored it in a tunnel, I admit, guilty. But it was a pretty good experience for a efficiency-minded SUV, let's call it. The only other version of this BMW X5 that I drove was the M50D variant, which is a bit pokier than this and more efficient. So I haven't driven a 40i or a 30D. I just drove the top of the range diesel one, and I loved it. I think I like it more than this one, but that's my own preference. Had I been able to charge this X5 45e at my destination and then have some juice in the battery for the return leg of the trip, I'm sure it would have achieved a comparable efficiency figure to the M50D. I can't help but notice that that car was better through the corners, which is not really its natural habitat. It just likes to cruise on longer flowing roads outside of town. And through the corners, and especially when you brake, you cannot escape this car's 2.5 ton curb weight. It's pretty hefty. Although with the suspension in sport, it doesn't really lean as much. I saw a few reviews of this particular car, the 45E, which comes as standard with adaptive air suspension, and reviewers complained that the car leans a bit too much in corners. However, frankly, I didn't really notice that much roll. You can't escape it because it's a tall and heavy SUV, so you know what you're getting into when you buy one of these. But the X5 is certainly among the best handling SUVs in the world. So if you're going to buy an X5 and you want to occasionally thrash it around a twisty mountain road or any driving road, I would recommend you avoid this particular variant, the 45E, because its extra weight does compromise it somewhat. But then again, this is the case with all plug-in hybrids. Usually the plug-in hybrid variant of a certain model will be more cumbersome around the bends than the non-plug-in hybrid version. And that's mainly down to the weight difference. In fact, it's only down to the weight difference. So plug-in hybrids, especially very expensive ones like this, don't really address people who care so much about fuel efficiency, because this vehicle starts at just under 80,000 euros in Romania, and this as tested model is 103,000. So whoever has that much money to spend on a car doesn't really care about efficiency. So this SUV addresses a niche audience who, let's say, need access to a European city center where there are EV-only zones now. And looking at the way things are going now, I'm sure there will be even more such restrictions enforced in Europe's large cities in the near future. Some cities want to ban the use of internal combustion engine vehicles altogether by 2035 or something ludicrous like that, which might sound good on paper, but it's not very realistic, is it? So for a very select group of BMW X5 buyers, this 45E will make a lot of sense, while for the rest of them it won't, because frankly, if you want an efficient X5, just get a 30D. So I covered a few hundred kilometers in this X5, and there's no denying it's a remarkably composed and comfortable thing for covering huge distances in. The 45E comes as standard with the adaptive air suspension. That certainly adds an extra level of plushness to this car. Although it has to be said that, like all tall SUVs such as this one, since you're sitting quite high in it and far from the roll center of the car, you perceive roll much more so than in a lower vehicle. With that being said, I do have to admit that I like the look of this latest X5. I think it looks so much better and sportier than its bubbly and rounded looking predecessor, which I was not very fond of. The X5 from 2 generations ago was again quite a looker, I think. So I'm happy that BMW's designers are back on form after that one generation hiatus. I really hated that. I don't like that BMW at all. I think it's one of the ugliest they've ever made. Whereas the previous X5 looked quite bulbous, I guess is the word, this one looks nice and sporty and elongated, even though it's a very tall vehicle. But I like that the front section, the hood, looks very long. I think that's a great look for any car, with the greenhouse set further back. I think that just exudes sportiness. And this latest X5 emphasizes that way more than the car it replaced. I also like the kinked character line that runs along the side of the car. It misses the front door handle, but then it kinks upward towards the rear, and it goes through the middle of the rear door handle. I think that's a really cool look. And in my eyes, the look of this particular example is enhanced by the Tanzanite blue paint job, which is phenomenal. I think it's one of the best blues I've ever seen on any car, ever. It's remarkable. Sometimes It has a more teal tinge to it, while sometimes it moves more towards magenta. It all depends on how the light hits it. And when it's really dark and there aren't any direct light sources, it almost looks black. It's super interesting. It's like a crystal that changes its color based on the angle of the light hitting it. It's amazing. In fact, I'm pretty sure tanzanite is a crystal, or it sounds like some sort of mineral anyway. Maybe one that was discovered in Tanzania, who knows? The look of this tester is further enhanced by the M Sport pack, which in this case has 21-inch wheels that are staggered. The front are 275s and the rears are 315s, so pretty beefy tires. And the rims have a 5 dual spoke design, and they're also two-tone. I think they have one of the surfaces is a diamond cut. They look pretty good. However, while I think the exterior is quite successful and I think it's a good looking SUV, especially optioned out like this with the M Sport pack, the tanzanite blue, the laser headlights, it looks really fancy. BMW clearly knows its clientele, and even though it has the image of a manufacturer of sporty cars, it has clearly engineered the X5 to prioritize comfort. Because, for instance, it's not even the sharpest handling SUV in its class. That distinction goes to the Cayenne, I think. That is quite a bit more tactile than this, although it has to be said, this does have a very responsive steering. I'm putting it in sport now, going to attack an S-bend, let's see. Absolutely no drama and very little roll. The design of the dash is very stylish and it's fairly minimalist, although I don't think minimalism was the key concern of the people penning this dash. It's a design that's unique to BMW and that I think still retains some of the traditional design cues of its older interiors. I absolutely adore these seats. I'm pretty sure they are optional and covered in also optional brown perforated leather. They are fully electrically adjustable. They even have electric side bolsters, the electric headrest, and you can also curve the backrest around your back, so if you're hunched, the headrest will actually touch the back of your head. It is definitely a very enjoyable place to spend a lot of time and cover a lot of kilometers in, especially on straight roads when you don't feel the inertia as much through the corners. Being a passenger in the back is also not a problem. There is more than ample rear legroom and headroom and shoulder room for even 3 people. This is quite a wide car. It is also a super practical car. It has door bins on all doors, and these ones in the front can even hold a big bottle. The glove box is very big. The armrest cubby is also very big and lined in felt. Actually, I would have liked the door pockets to also be lined in felt. I mean, come on, this is a feature you can find in a 15 grand Golf. This is a bit mean of BMW, I think, to just have your things bouncing around here. And since this is the M Sport pack version, it has the black headliner, which some people hate, but I love. My tester also has the optional 4-zone climate control, and the front seats are both heated and ventilated. The car is also packed with tech. It has surround view cameras with a 3D view of the car. It has gesture control, which some people find bad, but I think it works quite well if you learn it and understand how you're supposed to use it. There are very few instances when it doesn't work. I think BMW has perfected it, because the first time I tried it, I think it was in a 3 Series, it really didn't respond to input very well. Or then again, maybe I didn't know how to use it back then. But now I find myself using it intuitively without thinking about it when I'm in one of these cars. iDrive is one of the best infotainment systems on the market, and it now comes with both Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. It didn't have Android Auto before, but BMW has introduced it. So for people who don't like iPhones but like BMWs, you can now rejoice. This car also has the optional Harman Kardon sound system, which, if you like music, you should definitely spec it, because it makes a world of difference. The bass setup is fine. You can still listen to music adequately on it. But if you compare it to this optional system, the difference is quite noticeable, especially in clarity and when you crank it up louder. There is no distortion even if you crank it all the way up, although you might go deaf. With the plug-in hybrid, BMW has moved the gas tank, which used to be somewhere around the rear axle area, in between the rear wheels. It's been moved back into the trunk area because there's a big battery living where the fuel tank used to be. This drops cargo carrying capacity by 150 liters, so it drops to 500 liters, although you can still extend it to over 1700 liters if you fold the rear seats. And they fold flat, so you can push longer items all the way to the back. The split opening tailgate is fully electric, and you can operate either the top or the bottom part independently. You can sit on the bottom part, no problem. But if you have an X5 with the air suspension, there will be a button in the trunk for you to lower the suspension, and you can use it as an impromptu picnic table, which I did, and it's fine. In conclusion, I think the X5 is a very competent SUV. It is one of the best in its class. It probably has the best interior out of any SUV at this price point. So an 80K, 70K SUV. But make sure that you want the plug-in hybrid and you can use it to its full ability. Because if you buy the plug-in hybrid and don't charge it, that defeats the purpose of buying it. So if you're not sure you're going to be able to constantly remind yourself to keep charging the vehicle, just get the 40i. Or if you want even more power, get a V8 version of this. Why not? But the 40i is more than adequate at moving this car around. It's a very good engine. So the X5 is a thoroughly recommendable SUV if you have the money for it. Just make sure you really need the plug-in hybrid. Thanks for watching.